in the last 30 days or so, we've seen a small bit of optimism, small bit of price rebound. That could be people just trying to take advantage of the fact that prices were so beaten up over the last 6 months. So technically, it looks somewhat optimistic on the nickel side of things. I do want to note while we're on this slide, however, in the last 30 days, there's been some interesting news coming out of the London Metal Exchange. What's happened is, and I know we've talked about this in the past, exchange inventories of nickel on the LME, which is mandated to be class 1, which is refined nickel. It's also mandated to be from certain producers. They have a certain list of approved brands of metal that they allow on their exchange. And those volumes on the exchange right now are pretty lean. They've been dwindling for the better part of a couple of years. I would argue that's at least part of the reason why we saw a short squeeze on the LME, because ultimately the LME was not a good representation of the broader nickel market globally. I know we've talked about that in prior couple of Joes. What's worth noting is they are trying to make efforts to fix that issue. May not sound like a whole lot, but in the month of June, a new producer applied to be a supplier to the London Metal Exchange, and they actually got fast-tracked to be approved. So there's a new producer of class 1 nickel that's going to be allowed to put their metal on the exchange. The reason why I think that's noteworthy is perhaps more symbolic than it is, purely going to be seen in data. But this idea that the LME is willing to fast-track entities in about 30 days, that's a pretty fast process to say they're trying to make efforts to bring more class 1 nickel onto the market so that the LME can regain some reputational risk in terms of its need or its use as a market pricing mechanism. So it was only one supplier for now, but there are rumors flying around that there are going to be a number more suppliers of class 1 that will get approved in the coming months. And with that, over the next 18 months, there are a couple of analysts that are forecasting about 200,000 tons of new class 1 nickel coming to market over the next 18 months. So that's about 30% of new class 1 production that should be coming to market. Some of that could be approved to go on the London Metal Exchange. And in my opinion, again, Nick Webb's opinion, that should help to add more supplies, add more availability to the London Metal Exchange to ultimately close this gap between nickel pig iron prices and class 1 nickel. That's my hunch. And I think that's even the effort. They would probably even admit it at the LME. That's their goal, is to really fix that gap between what's happening in secondary nickel and class 1 nickel.
For context, where is it that a new producer is allowed to the LME? I mean,
I apologize. You're a little difficult to hear. Could you ask that one more time?
Oh, sorry. So for context, you said a new producer was been fast-tracked, approved on LME. Does that happen often that a new producer is allowed on or brought on?
No, it doesn't happen often. And that's one of the reasons why I think people are so surprised and taken back by it, because in my career, I'm not aware of any new suppliers coming online. It's certainly a very infrequent thing for that to occur. And yeah, the speed at which it occurred and the fact that it happened even at all was I think what shocked the market a bit.
Do you think it's getting pressure from, you talked in earlier with your Cup of Joes, so maybe competing exchanges for nickel? Do you think that played into anything in this?
Yeah, I think the threat of competition is certainly playing a role. I can almost guarantee you, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I can almost guarantee you that most exchanges in the world who allow metals to be traded on their exchanges, I've got to imagine they're chomping at the bit for the LME to make one more screw up so that more and more people push them away and go to different exchanges. They're certainly in the business of getting more players on their indexes as well. Looking at forecasts for nickel, little different story on the price of nickel. I'll in particular pay attention to this top line, which is the median forecast. We're currently sitting with nickel prices right around $9.80. As we look forward over the next 12 to 15 months, the market's basically saying flat to slightly down. I would argue that part of that is because there's an expectation that a lot of class 1 nickel is coming online over the next 12 months. As I mentioned, it's about 30% of new supply. So even with some of these things like electric vehicle production really demanding more and more nickel into the lithium-ion batteries, even with that trend occurring, there is a lot of nickel supply coming online as well. And that's why I think the expectations are a little more tepid, a little more flat within the nickel side of things as we look forward.